Hello, BookTube. I can hear an echo.
Hi.
All right, well, this is Margaret Pinard. Welcome to my channel. Welcome to our live book chat. Kari, go ahead and introduce yourself and your channel, and I will put it up on the banner.
Hi, my name is Kari. I'm from Caring for Books, which surprisingly, or maybe not, depending on how well you know me, took me a month to figure out because I don't do puns. But yeah, we are going to chat about Barchester Towers today.
Nice. Yes. Thank you. And so I'm very excited. Kari agreed like 2 months ago to read this with me because I found it was like in our overlapping to be read piles. And it was sort of too late for Victober, but like still sitting on my shelf. So she was ready to plow through this with me. And I think to very differing results. We got very different results. But yeah, that's what we're going to talk about today. So I thought I'd just start with general questions. This is the first time both of us have read Trollope is this month, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So I read the prequel to Barchester Towers, which is called The Warden, and it's very similar in tone and writing. So we'll discuss some of those things. And Victorian literature fan in general?
In general, yes. I've liked most of what I've read so far. To be fair, what I've read so far is Pride and Prejudice, Oliver Twist, and I don't know if Jonathan Swift is Victorian, but if he is, I've read him.
Yeah. And
I think he's 17th century, 1700s.
1700, 18th century, but Pride and Prejudice would also be considered Regency. So nice try.
Oh, that's true. I don't do Victorian England. I'm an Elizabethan person. So I can tell you what was written in Elizabethan times, but ask me Victorian and I pretty much can maybe, if I'm lucky, name one.
Nice.
Clearly.
Okay. We have different windows. I'm more of a Victorian buff and you are more of an Elizabethan buff. Good to know. Oh man, that leads to more questions about styles. Okay, cool. And thumbs up or thumbs down in terms of the reading experience?
I have to say thumbs down. If I can find my camera, there we go.
Yeah.
It's overwritten for me. He spent a paragraph within the first 100 pages describing somebody's nose. And not like a short paragraph. No. Like a full, long paragraph about a nose. I mean...
Mr. Slope?
Yeah, Mr. Slope. Like, I get it, we're trying to describe these people, but we don't need an entire paragraph about a nose. It felt very All the King's Men to me, and I hated that book in high school.
Who's that?
Robert Warren Penn? Penn Warren?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've heard Robert Penn Warren, but I haven't seen that.
Don't read it.
Okay.
It's awful. Don't read it.
Okay.
I stare at a road for 500 pages.
Well, I was a little more forgiving of that. I try not to skim. Sometimes I will skim descriptions like that, but because I was trying to get like the full whiff of Trollope, I was like, no, okay. They didn't have visual photographs or printing of things or like film, so they had to describe things very carefully to make sure that people got the right impression when they were reading, right? So he does spend a lot of time on Mr. Slope's appearance, but then he usually just like shortcuts later with saying greasy this or like oily that. And I'm like, see, yeah, that, okay, now I can, shortcut back to that description, which is funny. Yeah. Okay. All right. So overwritten. The thing I was most struck by, and I don't think I've seen this in any modern novels, and I've only seen it in Victorian novels, is the authorial voice that is so authoritative, as in omniscient and also so confident that they're dropping jokes and spoiling endings, and they're just like direct. They like have their hand on the reader, and they're just going like this, they're like telling people what to think and how to judge, which is interesting. There were a few different ways that he did that, and I wrote that down for some questions, but I thought he was pretty funny when he did that, and for the most part. So that was, I think, most of my enjoyment. What about
I definitely agree.
Okay. And the ending, worth it at all, or?
It fell flat.
Yeah, I was really disappointed by the ending, like, love sort of cataclysm scene. I was like, seriously, that's it? That's it? Like, maybe if it was the Pride
Right?
and Prejudice 2005 version of it, I'd be okay with it, but I was pretty disappointed.
Yeah, it was just building up to all of this and then sort of plateaued without really giving us what it was building up to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I like how things resolve, but I was just like, I wanted a better scene of that, like
Yeah.
standing in front of each other and not saying anything and looking at each other. Okay.
Right?
Cool. All right. So let's jump into some questions. We both wrote up questions, and yours tended to be more like critical thinking, and mine were more like text-based literature criticism stuff. So, do you want to take the first one and ask yours or answer? Either one, you can pick.
Sure. This will go a little bit to you being more Victorian and me being more Elizabethan.
Okay.
Um, how much of a background in Victorian England, literature, culture, all of that, do you think you need to appreciate this novel fully?
Okay. Now there's two, okay, I have two different answers to this because appreciate it fully. Of course, if you have more knowledge about the things that are going on, they will hit different, but the love story part and the humor and the mockery part might still, for the most part, ring true. Um, Actually, I highlighted a part. Yeah, so my question 10 is that there's an instance of explaining to the modern reader when the Grantleys can identify the probable passenger by the sound of the carriage on their gravel. Do you remember that? They're saying that couldn't
Yeah.
be this person, that couldn't be this person. It had to be this person. He's the only one who would assume to come up so hurriedly and dash out and, assault the door. And I thought, oh, he actually explained this. Like, I wouldn't have gotten it if he didn't explain how they deduced that. So maybe he doesn't do that for everything, but I thought that was a good example of where you didn't need to know the history because he actually explains it, overwrites it for you. So I say you probably had to have like a beginner course, or like have read at least several stories set in the Victorian times to understand why some things worked the way they did. But yeah, the religion and the politics coming together was iffy, and I don't think it was all that crucial. So I was good on that. How about you?
That makes sense. Yeah. I think if you wanted to get any sort of thematic experience out of this, you would need a relatively in-depth knowledge of Victorian England. But if you're just reading it for fun, like you said, the mockery and the romance, those come through very clearly, even if, like me, you weren't a super huge fan of the book. But
I need my understatement editing tool. Okay,
I don't
cool.
know. There were a lot of little bits about the religion and the politics, and having done research into it as well, because I was trying to figure out if I was missing something. Um, apparently the religion wasn't, it's not a religious novel of Victorian England, which makes sense because the religion isn't really the focus, it's more of the intrigue that goes on behind the church. And that aspect was interesting, but there was a lot that I felt like I missed because I'm so used to reading about the Church of England being created and figuring that out as opposed to, oh,
Right.
it's been established for 300 years.
Yeah.
Now we're just backbiting.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point. Yeah, I think you mentioned somewhere like the Catholic versus Protestant conflict versus the high church versus low church conflict. So,
Right.
okay, so minor tangent. The research that I did for my books in the 1820s and 1830s comes much closer to that high church, low church issue. And the religious prejudice I had to research for that was like mind blowing. Like, what are they arguing about? I mean, I'm sure we could find parallels for today, but it was just
Yeah.
like, I don't understand. It's all these things about your faith and your word. And it was just such a different um, stakes. The stakes were so different for people who were making these decisions. And Yeah.
Right.
You want to say anything about the other church conflict and how you saw that as a good example in some other book, or like Elizabethan clergy politics, or where you found?
I haven't read a lot of stuff about the church specifically in Elizabethan England. I tend to focus more on Elizabeth herself and her court. So I don't have a parallel to that. However, I will say if you read anything that has to do with Henry and his marriages, you do get a fair bit of intertwining with politics and religion, since his second wife is what made him break away from the Church of Rome anyway.
Cool. All right. All right. So I'm going to ask the next question, I guess. I'm not skipping here. Manners of the time. Which things that were done seemed antiquated or foreign and didn't make sense, and which seemed still like rules we had today? So there was some, like, in the Regency novels, you hear about the cut direct, and that sort of vanished as a phrase in Victorian novels, but it's still an idea of, like, in public, being cut by someone meant that your status was like assaulted, you know? And so that was a big thing,
Yeah.
like turning your back on someone in a conversation or talking over them, which the Dr. Grantley does. Leaving the room, boxing someone's ears, getting out of traveling with someone. What are some examples that hit you as like, why would that be a thing? Or were you were like, oh yeah, that's still pretty bad today?
Well, the talking over somebody, that happens a lot. I don't know that it's necessarily a status thing today. It's just people are so used to not having to listen that that's what they do. As far as things that hit me, to be honest, I think I was a little bit overwhelmed by the overwriting. So I don't know that I remember a lot of little mannerisms, but I don't know, they're just random things. Like, how they dress was very different, and the scandal that it was when Mrs. Prouty's dress got torn.
Oh yes, the Roquelaure or Roquelaure.
The sheer inanity of 3 different suitors, and none of them actually like each other. And she's only half in love with her dead husband by the end of it, because she's got these other suitors and she's not in love with any of them, but she marries one of them because he's better, and the fact that politics plays into that. That no matter what period I read from, if there's an arranged sort of marriage, it always strikes me as just idiotic. I get that it's very much a class thing, very much a status thing, but it's still, every time I'm like, really, that 1,200 pounds a year is gonna force you into living with somebody you may hate for the rest of your life? Okay.
Set you up for life. Yeah. Okay.
Right?
That brings me to a structure question. I'm usually not great at observing structure, but the piece of, like, the first part of the drama of today, the second part of the drama for today, when they were all at the picnic and like all those things were sort of happening, and the author kept saying this is the next set piece or whatever. Did that strike you as funny? Did that make sense with the structure of the greater book, or was it just like, why will you keep pointing to this? I don't need the dictatorial nature.
I think it made sense within the larger context of the book. I think it had a humorous element to it, because it was just this pointing out of very obvious happenstances. Personally, I didn't need it because, again, if you're gonna set up a drama that well, you shouldn't need to specify act 1, act 2, whatever, unless it's an actual play, in which case you drop the curtain and it's more of a physical thing so that they can change the set.
Yeah. I feel like he was taking delight in just like saying the obvious, and it was just like an opportunity to giggle behind his hand kind of thing. Like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. The other thing that came to mind was predictability. Did it feel predictable to you at certain points? And are you usually good at that? Because I'm not.
Oh no, I'm horrible at
guessing. All right. We're on the same level. No.
Horrible.
Good.
I think in this one, I definitely didn't think that Eleanor would end up with who she did. I don't know that I had even tried to predict the ending of this novel because there were just so many little elements and so many characters that were just arguing with each other, and I wasn't vested enough in the characters to be like, oh, I want you to do this, or based on XYZ, I think this is going to happen. It was more of a, all right, that's nice. You go marry them. You complain. You end up here, and the hospital's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. I was afraid the warden was going to get another sad ending. And so that's why I was a little bit, but I think he gets a good ending. So,
Yeah.
all right. Okay, I'm going to do a next question. I don't know if it's my turn, but the names. What did you think?
Oh my God, I love Victorian names.
Mr. Goodenough, Mr. Greenacre, Mrs. Lookaloft, who's like trying to social climb. I mean, they're so obviously like character pins. What Dickens says that too, right? I don't know,
Yeah.
like, what's your feeling on that? Is that a good thing? Were you amused by that?
I think for a lot of these Victorian novels, it's absolutely hilarious. It's one of the elements I actually enjoy in Victorian novels. The 3 that I've read or something, maybe 2, I don't even know.
Yeah.
Because it is so tongue-in-cheek almost. It's very much calling out somebody in that author's life, and you know it. And they know it. And I love that element of poking fun at somebody in real life, whether it be an archetype or somebody specific that author knew. And then hundreds of years down the road, readers like us look at it and go, well, this is hilarious because we can pinpoint these types of people in our own lives.
Totally.
The social climber, keeping up with the Joneses, or the self-righteous people who think that they know everything and cannot possibly be wrong.
Yeah, or that Senora, whatever her name is, Stanhope.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah.
So I actually really enjoyed the names.
Cool. Yeah, me too. I think that the names from Dickens especially are kind of something that leaks into the cultural stream, and like people pick it up without even knowing that it's like a thing. And I almost named a character something that was very close to a Dickens character, and someone told me, wait, that's a Dickens character. And I was like, it is? They're like, what? Yeah. But they're great. You know, they just have that like hit the ear well kind of thing.
Yeah, they're just great.
Go ahead and
right. Let me get my computer to actually scroll.
Yeah,
because there we go. Honestly. Yep. How did the framing of the conflict between old and new in the church change your view of the book? Like Mrs. Proudie versus Slope, or Rome versus England?
Old and new. Yes, this was more apparent in the second book than the warden, the first one. Especially because they were talking about the Whig government coming in and the low church sort of habits of the reformers kind of thing, as well as even getting people in positions who were younger so that they could do a better job. So not appointing people who have sort of like done their service and sort of are owed a sort of a, what's that called? Sinecure position, which is big in Victorian England. And what is new? What is new in this book? So I don't know. I don't know where to put the Stanhopes. They're in a sort of interesting position. I don't know where they belong. They're sort of like to the side. No one wants them. Like they don't fit in anywhere. The dad's just sort of given up, and his children are all horrid. So
right.
Yeah. So you did notice any references to Rome and the Bell, Book, and Candle and that sort of thing, because it was like they had their high and low church squabbles, but at least it wasn't Catholic. Like, you got that?
Yeah.
So
yeah, very Catholic.
Yeah. And I grew up Catholic and I'm no longer religious. So it's funny for me to see that because it was so not part of the first 20 years of my life that I'm like, oh yeah, I guess the rest of the world like that. Okay. But I don't think that the author sympathized with the new. I felt like all the sympathies were like he was trying to get us to sympathize with the old good people who maybe didn't have the most um, energy or, ardent spirit or an intellect, but like we're good people at heart and like sort of valuing that in this tale. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I agree. I thought it was very interesting to read all of the differences he sort of nuanced in between new and old, and then the comments about basically just go away Catholics. Because especially considering the history and everything else that had occurred in England by that time, re-religion, it made sense, but it's still baffling that it happened so recently. I mean, in the scheme of things, 200 years ago, though it may have been. And so to see new versus old, and then to look at sort of the age gaps and try to figure out where the Stanhopes fit in, it was all very interesting.
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know that the conflict between the churches framed it terribly differently for me, but I do think it made me look a little bit more at the age groups and the history of it and sort of how we got there and why he was going the way he was.
Hmm. I think maybe he wanted a 3-ring circus rather than a 2-ring. So that's why he brought in like this extra people coming back from Italy. Or maybe that's like the continental influence because Britain as an island is so insular and like they have the same people running the same games for so long that they needed someone else to throw into the mix to be like, wow, wild card. Like
That makes sense.
yeah, yeah. They were so foreign to the English experience that they introduced a note of chaos, but not like anything that anyone was actually going to fall for. Because I mean, we're better than that kind of attitude.
Right?
Yeah. Huh. Okay. Interesting. My next question is hesitation as regards judging a person's character. The author hems and haws about people being only as good as the next person, and thus avoiding decrying quite bad behavior. How does this differ from commentators today? Yeah, so whenever he would introduce a character, and you were probably like screaming about the descriptions of noses and also like all their actions beforehand, he had to introduce like everyone from the day of their birth to like the present day.
Mm-hmm.
And even afterwards when he would revisit a character he'd say, and everyone does this, it's not like it was any worse than the next person's behavior, when he would talk about henpecking or jostling for favors or something like this, trying to get in the press. And I was like, why would he keep doing that to us, to remind us that like we're no better than those characters even though we see their flaws? Or is it like a switch? Is he trying to say that they're terrible but everyone's like this, so be more forgiving? I don't know. What was your thoughts on that? What were your thoughts?
I'd have to do more research into Trollope himself. Um, but yeah, it felt sort of almost wishy-washy sometimes, because you get this sense that he really doesn't like this character or he really likes him and then comes back and says, but they're no better than you and me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, great, but am I supposed to like this character?
Right.
Because yes, flawed characters are amazing and nobody wants a perfect character because those are irritating as all get out. But I need some sort of indication which way I'm supposed to go with this character.
Right.
And this is not helping.
Yeah.
But it's definitely very different from most commentators or authors today, who oftentimes subtly enough that it's not an anvil on your head, but they do indicate very clearly which way they're rooting.
Mm-hmm.
So it was interesting. I liked that element of it as well. There were elements of this book I actually liked. It just could have been about 400 pages shorter in my edition.
Okay,
Which
so
would have made
yeah.
about 150.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so when you say commentators, who are you thinking of? Are you thinking of writers? Or are you thinking of like news people, or like what kind of storytellers do you imagine commentators today to be?
Both. There's
Okay.
a lot of books out there that are very prominent in their political views or political opinions. There's a lot of movies and TV shows like Doctor Who. Um, Apparently, Jodie Whittaker's Doctor has gotten very political storylines. I haven't seen it yet, which makes me
Ah,
angry, but it's not on any of my streaming services, and I don't want to pay for it because
yeah,
a lot of money. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, books, news. I mean, we've seen the news be painfully divided in the States this year,
right.
more so than normal.
Yeah,
And yeah, so news, books, movies, all of it, all of them have political undertones. And if they don't, then the author or the commentator or whatever is living under a rock.
right. I think I was thinking mostly of films because, like, if we're looking at the difference between introducing characters, Trollope goes through all the physical, goes through all the actions before that they've ever taken, and then comes back to say, but, compare it with the regular, how else are you supposed to get through life kind of thing. But the films today, we have a ready shortcut, just like I was saying before, because you see how people are dressed, you see how they cut their hair, how much makeup they wear, you see how they treat other people. I think that's my biggest cue is like if you have a scene at the beginning where they go into a coffee shop and they're just like dismissive, like they think they're better than other people. And if you have a tiny scene can be like 40 seconds and you have someone visiting an aunt who can't get out and like trying to bring her a book or something to talk about. It's like, okay, they're very thoughtful, and you have these visual shortcuts as well as like edited down pieces that I think are less wishy-washy because I don't think people like that today. Yeah.
No, people very much so like something decided and that tells them what to think. Again, not necessarily the anvil on the head because nobody likes being hit with an anvil, but
Right.
have some idea through those visual cues. Oh, they brought a book to their aunts, or oh, they're rude to their server.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe just a spatula. Maybe just a spatula to that.
Fly swatter.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Okay, your turn.
All right. Ooh, I liked that one. Um, there was, again, in my research, um, the theme was articulated as the biter bit, the bully bullied, the war between tyrants. And I thought that was a very interesting way to articulate the theme. Now, full disclosure, I am not good at finding themes. So I actually had to look up what the theme was in this book because I don't look for them. I just assume that somebody will hit me over the head with an anvil with a theme if they actually want me to see it. And if they
Okay,
don't, then I.
yeah, I
So,
don't
what do you
know.
think of that articulation?
Uh, it doesn't say much to me. Um, the biter bit, the bully bullied means you're fulfilling the roles that you were born into, I guess, and you're fulfilling expectations that other people have of you. And the war between tyrants, I would say that means that the people who already have the power ended up with it again. But I don't think that's true for this book, right? Because if like I would consider Dr. Grantley a tyrant and Mr. Slope a tyrant and Mr. Prudy, I said Prudy in my head, so we could just say it differently. Those are what appear to me to be the tyrants, and none of them won. So I was like, yay! What did you think? I don't really get the phrase, so maybe you had more context for it.
Um, I think there was, for me, it was um, more so the tyrants were brought down, the
Mm.
bully lost, um, is how I read that. And maybe it was the context of what I was reading at the time. But in that sense, I think it fits very well because, like you said, Grantley, Slope, they didn't, none of them won. None of the people who had the power at the beginning were terribly well off at the end. I mean, none of them, I don't remember anybody dying. Could be wrong, but I don't
Just
think
the
so.
team. Just the dean, but the
Yeah,
poor dean.
minor detail.
Yeah.
So I think it was sort of a just desserts kind of a thing, as opposed to like the power stayed where it quote should be.
Hmm. Yeah, so if you think about it in terms of the power, the over power structure, the power over structure, that stayed where it is, right? So like the church and the state are still like this, and the government decides that clergy and like yes, you can nudge here and here, but they had to go to the Oxford Fellow and get the Dr. Gwyn's influence, and then he had to know someone here who knew someone there. So it's still the corridors of power. It's not like it's any more democratic, small d. But maybe the phrase that you recited and found is not the way I was thinking of it, and so that's why it makes sense because it's the opposite.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't know. I like that about reviews and literature in general, though, is that one phrase makes people think so differently about it. I mean, we both came at that from a very different angle and
Yeah.
came to completely different conclusions from these 6, 8,
Right?
7, 8, 9, 10 words. 10. I can
Yeah.
count. It's
Yeah.
fine.
Well, who would you say was the biter? The biter bit? Is that someone who's like coming into a trap, or is that someone who is like sitting down to a meal? I don't I don't know.
I think it's like a minor nuisance, you know?
Like a flea biter.
Yeah.
Ah.
I don't know. Maybe Mrs. Prouty was definitely not a nuisance. She was just straight up irritating. Um, Although, to be fair, if you're going for a horsefly kind of a nuisance, that would definitely fit her.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I think maybe the suitors, as far as the love plot between the suitors and Eleanor,
Mhm.
love, that could have been the biter because
Love.
it's not like that ended well, right?
Yeah. 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 Okay. Wow, you're right. 10 words, lots of different interpretations. I wonder who said that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to like look that up now. Trollope Society. Good research.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. We talked a little bit about spoiler alerts. Okay, what about Trollope's characterization of women? Um, one of the things I marked was when he said Eleanor had no such self-knowledge. Like she wasn't hurting because she was too ignorant to know that these things were going on or like she was unhappy. And that stuck in my craw. And the despotic, as he describes Mrs. Prouty. So one appears good in ignorance and purity, Eleanor Bold, while the other appears bad in her strength and her attempts at domineering. Is he consistent with these like value judgments? Using those two as like the foils to each other, like is he consistent with what's good and what's bad behavior, or are there things that you are like, wait?
I think as far as those two particular characters, he portrays them about the same throughout the book. I do think he does a double standard between the women and the men, though, because there are some of the men who clearly have no idea what's going on.
Bishop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Not a clue. But he portrays him as, if not outright good, then at least beneficent in his ignorance. And one of those things that kind of rubs the wrong way. I get it's Victorian England. I get the Moors are outdated to us. And so at the time, that would have made perfect sense. Men are good in whatever state they can be found in, whereas women are only good if they're ignorant. And if they're actually intelligent creatures, God forbid anyone should go near them because apparently they're just going to all die. I have to take off my 21st century hat when I read historical things and put on my non-21st century hat because otherwise I get really angry.
Yeah. Yeah. What was I thinking when I wrote this one up? So I think obviously by the morals of the times, it was better for a woman to like follow her father and the independence. So here's what I was thinking was the danger that Trollope introduces, is that the widow is wealthy for the time, and so she has independence. And even if she is not like, oh, I'm gonna go gangbusters, use this independence to do XYZ, like the bishop's wife would have done, she is exposed to this danger and risk, and so is therefore thrown into as an object into this like plot of other people, but she doesn't have agency in that. She's not deciding. So the only way she can act in this drama of 3 acts is by reacting to the men's proposals, or reacting to her family members' suspicions, and so yeah, 21st century hat. I guess that rubs me the wrong way as well. And then for the bishop's wife, Mrs. Prudy, I would say he has another passage where he's like, she wasn't that bad, and you're like, no. What could I like about her? I mean, yeah, I guess you're right. It's a 21st century opinion to look back and admire like that spirit that just goes against just for the hell of it. It didn't seem like it was a very good marriage. And I was so wondering, like, what happened in the bedroom that night that the bishop was like, nope, never again. The wife's got the pants. Like, never mind. What happened? They closed the door on that. We don't get to know. Maybe she's the biter. Uh-oh. I think you're frozen. Uh-oh. Technical difficulties. Are you back? I can hear you. I just can't see a picture yet.
I don't know where my router
is.
No. Up and over. Okay.
This is a way to make it more exciting.
There we go. That seems better.
Cool.
Yeah. I live in a renovated garage, so sometimes the walls get a little bit irritable with the Wi-Fi. Super fun.
Oh, okay. Moving to higher ground.
To the other side here.
Yes. We'll let you move to higher ground. I'll put up the thing that I have going this weekend, which is I've got 5 books out and 3 are in a series, and the first in the series is on sale for $10. So if anyone wants to order it, I put the bookshop link there and I'll put it in the chat so it goes out. That's a great deal, and you might, want it for a gift for Christmas or something. So that's what I'm doing to celebrate my book birthday. Here we go. All right. You settled?
Nice. There we go.
Cool.
I think so.
Okay, good. All right. We're talking about women, and I was talking about the bishop's wife, Mrs. Prudy, and if there was anything I liked about her, but I don't know. Anything else that you wanted to say about women characterization in general?
No.
Okay. Then it's your turn for a question.
All right.
Not a religious
This goes
novel.
back to our widow question. What do you think about all of the machinations through money and marriage say about the Victorian times?
All the references to money. So when I was writing stuff up for this, I was thinking machinations would be like a subtitle for this, because that's all it is. It's like all people doing this to try to like get their hands on a comfortable position or like a good income. Yeah, and I haven't even thought about quiverful. Quiverful. What kind of a name is that? What is that suggesting?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, unless it's like to refer to the 14 children, because his quiver is full of children. Or
yeah,
I don't know about that one. Money. I guess I'm used to it being in Victorian novels, because that was like be all end all concern. After status was money, because money started to contribute to status, whereas before it was just your bloodline kind of thing. It's just like who your parents were and what you could prove that way. Um, yeah. I read North and South for Victober,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that was a really good one in terms of like uh, uh, gentleman's family that was really poor versus a
Yeah.
industrialist who had grown up poor but now was really rich, and like having their culture shock against each other and why and stuff, and like that can definitely travel to our time as well. But yeah, I was very comfortable with references to money and figuring out how that affected people in the plot. How about you, Elizabethan lover?
Um, I have actually read North and South. There we go.
There you
And
go. This
I
is great.
thoroughly enjoyed that one. That one was good. Um, I didn't mind the references to money because I have enough of an understanding at a glance anyway of how class doesn't necessarily mean money and money doesn't necessarily mean class. It was just very interesting to see how much of an impact and how much it was required to have money in any sort of marriage. They talked about all of these marriages, and I mean, they focused on Eleanor's and why they were going for it, what she had, the 1,200 pounds a year, the bishopric, and like the money that that made, or being the warden of the hospital and what that made, and why all of these people really wanted it. There's, God, I think it's the Stanhopes who have 14 children, Quiverful 14 children.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the wife goes and begs Mrs. Prouty to give her husband the job because she's got 14 children, which also really makes me glad for birth control.
Right. A lot of Irish stew to make for one sit down dinner. Yeah.
Right. So it was really interesting to see how important money was and how obvious it was, because I think in a lot of shows and other books, be they Elizabethan, Edwardian, Regency, whatever, they may have the money as the initial catalyst for the marriage. Pride and Prejudice, for example. Oh, he's got 10,000 pounds a year in an estate. Go hook up with him.
Yeah.
But in this one, it was so very different in that it was, hey, she's got 1,200 pounds. Let's go try to hook up with her. Even though by the end of it, there's no love lost between any of the parties. I recognize my own ignorance in much Victorian literature in that I don't know if that's more common to have money without love in these novels or to have money and love as in Jane Austen. But the
Yeah, I
three
would
books
say
I've read,
yeah, I would say it is pretty common to have that sort of commercial aspect, but it seemed even more raw and bare in this thing because it was like people haggling over a chicken in the market. It was just like set so differently about like, oh yes, he assumed it would be his. And so like the Stanhope sister where it's like, oh well, of course the widow should be ours because we deserve that money. And it's just like, bitch, like yeah, it's hard. It's good for the plot device because then you have, people angling for the same goal and you don't have to have Eleanor be like a paragon of everything to everybody because that's less likely. It's more likely that people would all be in love with the money. Um, yeah. Money.
right?
Yeah. Um, yeah, you're right. So Regency novels have that definitely as plot devices. Thinking Victorian, I think there's less of that like Bennett 10,000 a year sort of talked about, but it's definitely like you're looking at the cut of their clothing and you're looking at what carriage they arrive in, and all those little details add up to. They have to write them. They can't show them to us, but those are their shortcuts in that day and age about like what do we think of this person, right?
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Cool. Um, is it my turn? I know we
Yes.
have to wrap up soon.
Yeah.
There are references to classical literature sprinkled throughout, but we no longer have a common core to be able to understand these in many cases. So this is probably part of your overwriting problem. I tried to read Dorothy Dennett's Game of Kings series. Have you heard of her? She's like early 20th century. She's supposed to be this amazing English, Scottish, British writer, and she has this novel that talks. It's Elizabethan, actually. Well, it's 16th century, so it's like around that time, and it's about the succession of some earl or count or something, and it depends on like the religion. But there's also like cattle stealers and stuff like this. So there's lots of things at play, and there was so much reference to things that I had no idea that I was just like, oh my God, what is this book even about? I can barely move through the plot because it's so coded. Like everything this one guy says is supposed to be like an immensely entertaining intellectual exercise, and I'm like not there. So I feel like I was better able to keep up with Trollope, but like those sort of things, now that when I see them too much, they really turn me off. Did you find there was some of that not being a Victorian connoisseur, or how did that hit you?
I actually really love when books quote things and reference other classics and Latin works and what have you.
Ugh.
I will say it does take me a lot longer to work through a book when there's that. For example, Utopia by Sir Thomas More. I have to reread that one, but I took notes the first time I read it and then researched a bunch of it because I didn't have a clue what he was talking about for probably a solid half of the book.
Oh my gosh. Good on you. Yeah.
It's also a philosophical work, so that did not help. But
right.
I still really enjoy all of these references to things that I may have only vaguely heard about or might have actually read occasionally. That happens, and it's exciting because it broadens my scope and I think really puts me into the mindset of the author. So for Trollope to reference all these different classics, or for Walter Scott to do it, it's really fun to read through this and go, oh yeah, I actually know what you're talking about, or why do I know that? Or I have no idea what you're talking about, so let me Google it real quick because that's a thing we now have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
That's one of my favorite parts about old books.
Awesome. Cool. Well, that was a positive for you. Excellent.
Yes.
Okay. Why don't we make yours the last question, and then we could do more general channel stuff at the end.
All right. So this one is sort of for my own edification as well, but there came up in the research a discussion about civil servants in the UK versus the US. John Sutherland, who was a professor, clarified that civil servants in the UK are neutral, and civil servants in the US are definitely not. And so my question is, can you as a reader tell the difference between civil servants in Victorian England versus in the States at all? And what do you think?
Okay, I think that's backwards, actually. So my understanding from other Victorian research is that when you had a new government come in, like the Whig government, they would appoint all their own people. So that's why at the beginning of this book, he really, really wanted to get the appointment before the government changed, because all the civil appointments would be, and church, because church is part of their state, would be not favorable to the old guard, right? Whereas in the US, the civil service, the accountants and the security and like everyone in the government is supposed to be there no matter who is in power in the executive and legislative. So that seems to be the opposite of what you said.
That's what I thought too, but I double checked it, and so I don't know if my brain just flip-flopped it twice, which is entirely possible. It's happened before. But I agree with you. I think in the UK, from what I understand, they go in and out with the government. And here we're elected or get the job and we stay there come hell or high water.
Well, the elected people come and go, but the people who are appointed, except for the cabinet, I think, are not supposed to be political. Yeah. It's kind of like how we have elections and we have at a certain local level, they're nonpartisan because you're not supposed to be just choosing based on a party. You're supposed to be able to, I don't know, get along with your neighbors. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Trying to think of any other references in this that I might have missed. I don't know. I don't have much more on that question. Sorry.
You're good.
All right, so you're not going to read any more Trollope. If you have a next Victorian novel, which direction would you head? Like, what's the farthest away from Trollope that you want to run now that you're like, okay, done?
I don't even know. I'm looking at my classics shelf, which is why my head is very tilted.
Yeah.
I'd like to try George Eliot again. I read Silas Marner, and I wasn't the biggest fan of it, but I didn't mind it, and I've heard other works are better. So I'd like to try George Eliot again. Otherwise, I recognize that Victorian means, strictly speaking, British literature, but I do want to read Jules Verne, who is French, but from the same time period.
Yeah, that'd be
I read
good.
20,000 Leagues Under the Sea a couple years ago, and it was phenomenal. So I really want to go and dive back into some of his works. And that's probably about as far as I can get from Trollope, is going to Jules Verne.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah.
What about you? Will you finish the series?
No, the reason I got this omnibus edition was because I wanted to read Miss Mackenzie because it has a Scottish connection, and so that time period with the Scottish history was outside research. But so that's why I had this in the first place. But in terms of other Victorian novels, oh, I know. The shortest one. Okay, so if I'm going to do the same thing and go as far away as I can, I just got a copy of Jerome K. Jerome's Three Men on a Boat, which is like this. And I'm like, yeah, we could do that in 2 days. And it seems funny and it's about London. And so I was like, that would be a good palate cleanser, if you will. But for this month, I'm actually working on nonfiction November, so I'm kind of behind on the nonfiction parts, but I've done a good handful of Native Indigenous authors for Indigathon. So those are the two things I'm working on now, and yeah, I just moved to my parents' house for the next couple of months for a safe holiday thing. I drove. Don't worry. And I only brought 6 books, and so it's going to be focus and get these done, and no time for mood reading. So we'll see. Yeah,
brave woman, only bringing 6 books for several months.
I know. We're going to be busy. It's going to be a lot of family time and discussions and going over photos and how to use the computer and this kind of thing. So yeah. And then we're going to highlight, hey, Marilyn Maya's on. Thanks for stopping by. I was just going to highlight a couple things we had in the hopper, if you want to use that term. Kari is going to be participating in this cool thing. You want to tell us a little bit about Graceling?
So Graceling is a young adult fantasy novel, and it is the first published in what is currently a trilogy. The prequel is Fire, and then the sequel is Bitter Blue, all by Kristen Kishore. She is coming out with a new novel, which will be another sequel following Bitter Blue, and it comes out in January, called Winter Keep. I love the Graceling trilogy. It is one of my top 3 trilogies or books ever.
Whoa.
So I've had the book pre-ordered since July when I found out. Wow. Because I'm really excited. There are also other people who enjoy these books as much as I do, and one of them is Sarah the Dreamer. So she was looking for people to do this readathon with her. We're going to read all 3 books, Graceling, Fire, and then Bitter Blue, in 2-week increments, and then have a live show leading up to the release of Winter Keep in January. I believe it's January 19th that comes out.
These are
so on
fancy
December
books.
5th.
They're like thick, right? Woo,
Graceling is about 500 pages.
That's a fair bit, yeah. Reread though, yeah.
I've read Graceling at least 10 times. Rereading
Oh
it is not a hard. I like
no.
these books so much that when each of them came out, I brought them to school and read through my classes in high school.
Oh my gosh.
And lunch. I got to the twist in Graceling at lunch, stood up and screamed because it was so good. And my friends all looked at me like, what the hell? It's like, I don't know how to explain to you, but read this. It'll help.
That sounds like a good book. Wow.
Yeah. So the first live show is going to be for Graceling on December 5th. We don't know what time yet, but follow me on Twitter and I will let you guys know when that happens.
All right. And your Twitter handle is?
Caring for Books.
No
it's
dash,
just the number 4 as opposed to the 4.
Right. Caring for Books. No dash.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Did I get that right? I want to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, and then I was just gonna say I have so what I have coming up is Jóla Bókaflóð, which is a weird Icelandic word, which means Yule Book Flood. It's a book fest that's turned into a literary festival that I'm putting on with my partner Elle Mitchell, and we're both authors who are just putting this on to help other indie authors. It's super fun. We've got a merch store. We've got panels set up on our YouTube channel. And I'm going to be doing some like just fun sort of sketches, lives in the meantime to tell people about it, who's going to be there, the authors that we've got to talk, and the subjects that they're going to talk about, which are all really interesting. So I'm going to be on with A Mighty Blaze. And so, again, we don't have the time, but it's going to be on December 2nd on Facebook instead of YouTube. And I think our goal is to do like an outdoor wood stove, hygge, dogs involved, and cocktails and stuff to just like talk about Jóla Bókaflóð. So that should be fun.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, a little midwinter warmth should be good. We start December with some warmth. That'll be good.
Yeah.
All right, so we're almost to the hour. I just want to say thank you, Kari, so much for coming on and reading a book that you hated with me.
Well, I didn't mean to hate it.
Yeah, you can yeet it. You can like throw it away across the room and be, scream in a bad way and be like, I'm done.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me and pushing me to read something that honestly probably wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Yeah, twisting your arm. Very cool. All right, well, thanks for anyone watching and commenting and following both our channels to see what other stuff we like, because obviously we have many more directions to go in, fantasy and, I don't know, Icelandic literature? We'll see. Have a great Sunday. Have a great Thanksgiving if you're in America.
Yeah, you too.